Hi, I'm Jason Wilkinson with International Welding. I'm the Vice President of Sales with 30 years of stud welding experience. I'm also on the development team for our product line. Today we're going to do an unboxing of a stud welder, setup of a stud welder, welding, and troubleshooting. IWT offers 5 CD or capacitor discharge stud welding systems for welding steel, stainless steel, aluminum, and other non-ferrous metals. This is our entry-level model, the LYNX Quickshot. It has a 1/4 inch capacity and used for insulation welding. This machine here is the LYNX Modular. It has a 5/16 capacity and used for sign manufacturing and general sheet metal fabrication. These 2 welders here are a LYNX Titan, one with a simple display and one with our graphical interface where we can look for weld quality and graphing of welds and weld counter. And this machine here is our LYNX Atlas, which is used for automation. It has relay outputs so we can talk to a PLC or a robotic system. Today we'll be unboxing our LYNX Modular system, but any of these systems purchased through IWT will have the same components and accessories. This is how a typical system would be shipped, including the carrying case, warranty card, our new single sheet setup instructions, the power supply or the welder, an accessory package with setup tools, a gun, and 2 ground cables. Remember, the most common problems with studs not welding is the setup. It's important to follow the instructions that are provided. We also have a QR code that will link you directly to our manual. We're going to go through the setup of a gap welding gun, the preferred method for welding aluminum. The first thing that we want to make sure is that the welder is sitting on a sturdy workbench or cart. Next, we're going to install the grounds. These connectors will go where they're marked on here for ground. Then we're going to install the gun connectors. It's important with the welding connectors to make sure that we twist and lock them because all of our welding current is going to be going through them. Control connector goes into this port, finger tight. Finally, we're going to install the power cord. It's located on the rear of the machine with the power switch. Next, we're going to grab our accessory package. We're going to identify the collet that we're going to be using today. Today we're welding 1/4 inch aluminum. We're going to start setting up the collet. When we install the stud into the collet, we want to make sure there's a small gap between the flange of the collet, the flange of the stud, and the collet itself. About 30 thousandths, or the thickness of the flange. That's to ensure that the stud is not welded into the collet or we get slag buildup clogging the tines so it can grip. Then we want to load this collet into the gun and make sure we bottom the collet out. We're going to get our 17mm wrench and snug on the chuck nut. The last setting and the most important one is the amount of stick out of the fastener. We now have the new snap caps that go over here, and it's a fixture to align the correct stick out. Using this fixture will ensure that we have just the flange sticking out past the brass ring every time. This is the most critical part of the setup. Every gap gun that we sell, we preset the spring pressure to positive. It's important when welding aluminum that the spring pressure is set to positive. Now that the gun is all set up and the machine set up, we can power on the system. The switch is located on the rear of the machine. And you'll see that the ready light's on and the power light, and then once we become up to charge or a set point, the ready light illuminates green. On the front of the machine is a small chart here where you can pick your stud diameter and the material you're welding and get a ballpark setting. So again, we're welding 1/4 inch aluminum. So we're going to find out aluminum and 1/4 inch, and we're going to be set to about 150 volts. So we're going to adjust the potentiometer till we get to about 150 volts. A few volts difference is not a big deal. Now that the machine is set up, the gun's set up, We're going to put our grounds directly onto our work surface and we can make a weld. It's good practice to use both ground cables. Using one ground cable, the welds may be cold or you may have arc blow. Also, always ground directly to the part you're welding. What makes these good welds is 360-degree flash all the way around the head of the fastener, no pockets or voids in the weld, and that the head is almost been pushed into the aluminum. Now to show you what bad welds look like, we're going to make a cold weld by decreasing the voltage and then a hot weld by increasing the voltage. This is a cold weld. There's no fusion around the head of the fastener, and this weld's hot or too hot, and there's an excessive amount of splash around the fastener. This is our setup for steel welding with a contact gun. We're going to plug both grounds directly into the connectors on the front, marked ground, twist to lock. We'll place our ground cables directly onto our work surface. Now we're going to plug the gun in. The weld cable is going to plug directly into the cable marked gun or the port marked gun, and our control cable into our control cable connector. Again, it's important to twist to lock. Now for the setup of the gun. Open our accessory package. We're going to be welding number 10 fasteners. I've selected the number 10 collet. We're going to insert a stud into the collet and adjust the backstop. There will be a small gap between the flange of the fastener and the collet. This is to ensure that we don't weld the stud to the collet and none of the weld splatter will get stuck in the tines. Load the collet into the gun. Make sure you bottom it out all the way. And then tighten the chuck nut using our 17mm wrench. Then we can get our setup fixture marked contact, put it on the front of the gun, slide it down until it touches the stud, and then lock the set screws for the legs. When our setup cap is removed, we'll have the exact amount of stick out on the gun that's desired, and it's roughly 3/32 of an inch. The machine can be powered on using the power switch in the back. And then we're going to use our little graph here, and we're going to look at steel and number 10, and adjust our voltage to 100 volts. We have our power light on, and our ready light means our capacitor's at charge. And now we're ready to weld. Hold the gun firmly against the plate, make sure you're perpendicular to work surface, and pull the trigger. A good steel weld will have a nice bead all the way around the head of the fastener. There'll be no voids between the fastener and the plate. Now I'm going to demonstrate a bad weld. We're going to weld one that's cold, and we're going to weld one that's hot. This weld was too cold and it didn't hit here at all. This one was cold but lacks fusion. This one is too hot with excessive expulsion of material. Question number 1, is it necessary to ground directly to my part? Absolutely. You get the best welds by grounding directly to the part. If you don't ground directly to the part and say a tabletop, you can get marking on the other side of your plate, or you can get this poor welds. It's always best to weld between both grounds. Another point with grounding is you should never share another ground with a MIG or TIG welding machine or be grounded the same work surface. If you plan on doing multiple welding operations in the single area, it's best to shut down the machine while you're doing the other welding. The frequency from other welders can damage the inside components. Another frequently asked question is, how should I locate? One thing you should not do is use a center punch and use the tip for location. The tip is necessary for drawing the arc, and center punching is bad and will create bad and inconsistent welds. What you should do is use a fixture or a template for your location. If you are cutting something on a router, it's also completely acceptable to router out a circle around the fastener's head so you can use that for locating. When welding, you want to make sure that your plate is fairly clean. For CD welding, we should be looking at using cold rolled steels and avoiding hot rolled steels. Mill finished material is typically good as long as it's free from cutting oils and greases. Never try and weld through a painted surface. The material that you're applying the studs to needs to be clean and free from paint. The other side can be painted and not damage the surface, but the side you're welding to needs to be clear. If you're having a problem stud welding, the first thing to do is take a step back and look at the entire situation. Rarely the machine's the problem if the machine is turning on and you're able to discharge or make a weld with it. If your studs are not sticking, always check your setup first and your plate and your fasteners. Spring pressure is very important when CD welding. Our gap guns are preset at the factory for positive spring pressure for welding aluminum and other non-ferrous materials. There is an adjustment on the back of the gun for welding other materials like steel. When you weld a steel, you would normally want less spring pressure. I recommend starting at halfway. To adjust the spring on the contact gun, pull the cap back and rotate. Clockwise for more spring pressure, counterclockwise to reduce spring pressure. The spring pressure on a contact gun is not as critical as most people think. We select a spring with a spring rate of 26 to 36 pounds and it's factory set for the ideal spring pressure of 30 pounds. Under normal use, expect to get about 1,000 welds out of a collet. Unthreaded pins will get more welds. Starting in 2026, all welders are included with the new setup fixtures, one marked for gap and one marked for contact. This will ensure the proper setup of the gun, the amount of studs sticking out past the brass ring. It's one of the most critical settings for stud welding. If you have a machine prior to 2026, or you've lost one of your new setup fixtures, you can visit our website, IWTmarketplace.com, and order a new one. One of the most common phone calls I receive for gap welding is the gun's not firing. This is more than likely to do with the touchdown wire and the set screw in here not making a proper contact. In order to fire the machine safely, we need to have the set screw touching the touchdown wire. If you notice any damage to your cables or connectors, contact IWT so we can ship your replacement parts out. For your convenience, you can download the full manual of any of our products online by simply scanning the QR code on top of the machine. Thank you for watching. And don't forget, for any additional questions or if you need to order stud welding supplies, visit IWTmarketplace.com.